How do you prepare an effective presentation? Welcome to Tea at Taxevity, where you get insights from insiders, our many clients and friends. I'm Pramod Sharma, your actuary at Taxevity. I help people who care about sustainable financial independence harness the power of life and health insurance. Our guest today is Gerardo. Gerardo, what do you do when you're not being interviewed? And first of all, how do we say your full name?
My full name is Gerardo Suarez del Real. And if you want to get my name right, actually, it's like Gerard with an O at the end. And the spelling, the phonetics will be G, you change it for an H, and that's it. It's a soft G, we call it in Spanish, so Gerardo.
Okay.
That's my name. Yeah.
And what do you do when you're not being interviewed?
Well, when I'm not being interviewed by you, I essentially help my clients to create effective presentations.
Okay, first of all, what do you mean by an effective presentation?
Well, an effective presentation, it's a great question because many times we see a presentation that it's pretty, say, or it looks okay,
Yes.
and we think it's effective. Or maybe at the end of the presentation, people seem happy.
They clap.
Yes.
They say, hey, that was a great presentation.
Exactly. So we stop measuring at that moment, and really, the way we measure the effectiveness of a presentation is if your audience remember your message. That is the key.
Okay, that's a really good measure, yes, because ultimately you want them to remember your message rather than to remember, oh, you had some really nice slides.
Absolutely. It's like those commercials. Have you seen those TV commercials in which you remember the commercial, but you don't remember the product?
Yes, and they seem to win all these awards.
Yes.
And you just think, well, yeah, it was a great commercial, but I don't know what the product was.
Mm-hmm. So that's a very ineffective commercial. So it's the same with presentations. I think in general, or most people will tend to concentrate on, nice graphics maybe. And I'm not saying that you don't have to pay attention to those. Absolutely, you have to. But we think sometimes, or most people think, that by having a good template, if you want, and
Right.
particularly we don't use templates, but let's say that you found a very nice looking template and that's the success of your presentation. Well, it's far from it. Far from it.
How do you help your clients create effective presentations?
Well, we have a system. We create a system that has several parts. Essentially, in a very general way, and the simplified version of the system would be you first create and define your main message. That's critical. And it's linked to your purpose, of course. Purpose is simple. Creating a main message is way more important and more difficult than it actually sounds like. Main message.
How would you figure out what the main message of a presentation is?
Imagine you are doing a presentation and, in every group you have key people that you're talking to.
Yes,
Maybe,
and it's not always the whole audience. It may
not
be
usually,
a couple of decision makers, for instance.
Exactly. So let's say you are in front of that person. You have only 10 seconds, and he will remember only one thing.
Okay, that becomes the
main message.
main
You usually
message.
no more than 10 to 15 words, preferably catchy, so well written. You will spend a lot of time working on that 15 words if you want. But it's the keystone of your presentation. If you don't have a clear, concise, and compelling message, stop.
Can you give us an example of what a key message might be?
It might look similar to a call to action, for instance.
Okay.
For instance, we have a flagship presentation, so to speak, that we do a lot. We call it preferred presentations. So our main message is actually borrowed from the queen of presentations, Nancy Duarte.
Oh yes, I've read a couple of her books.
Amazing. And one of her key messages that I found, at least, is minimize visual, maximize verbal. So you see only 4 words, and we repeat that in that presentation several times, telling them, you know what, it's not the slides, it's what you say. It's not the slides, it's you. So what we're trying to tell with that main message is to change the star should be you, not the slides, so to speak. So that's a clear main message, minimize visual, maximize verbal, easy to remember, short, and that's it. It will get you thinking. You might call me later to clarify or help you with that.
Right, and if you minimize the amount of content on the slide, then it means that the speaker has to be better prepared because they can't simply just turn to their slide and read what's there.
Oh, that's terrible. And we see that so often, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
People reading.
In your system, because you were telling me a little bit about it before we started recording, you mentioned the importance of using analogies. Could you please tell us what an analogy is and how we might use one?
Yes, in our system, as I told you before, the first step is creating that main message.
Mm-hmm.
And I would like to repeat that.
Okay.
And maybe the main message for this talk actually could be, if you don't have a main message, stop.
Okay.
don't move any further because it will be wasting your time.
Mm-hmm.
So once you have that main message, that will help you to filter many things and to define a metaphor. The importance, or analogy. The
Mm-hmm.
importance of the analogy is that it will make everything more tangible. If I just dump data in that presentation, I just keep telling and telling numbers or figures or facts or whatever I'm telling,
Mm-hmm.
it's important. It's part of the message. People need to know that.
Then they start yawning.
Yes. But if they won't remember any of that, even if they need to know, what's the purpose?
Mm-hmm.
And again, going back to the success of a presentation, or how do we measure the effectiveness of a presentation and its memorability? Well, if you dump data or whatever you're dumping on them,
Right.
if it's too much, they won't remember anything. And it's very common. You see presentations with, 10, 15 points, 20 points, and people, they won't remember one. If you give maybe 3, more powerful, more concise, let's say they remember 1. Chances are that they will remember 3. But let's say they remember 1, the worst case scenario.
Right.
It's more than 0.
Yes.
And if that is your main message, then you have them.
Mm-hmm. Can you give us an example of an analogy?
For instance, recently we were working with a client on a pharmaceutical company, and she's talking about a rather dry topic, and the analogy we used is a Formula One, race cars.
Okay.
So it was, of course, quite a shock for the audience to see, like, wow, race cars, and this is a serious presentation. And it worked pretty well, actually, because, of course, it's very memorable. And it landed the message clearly. The message was, well, we are your pit crew, so we'll help you to succeed, to win races.
Okay.
So it's more tangible, and you can see the success. And even if you don't follow Formula One, it's something that we see in the news, or maybe NASCAR or Indy, any type of competition, of cars competition, you would be, it's easy to identify you, the audience, with that topic instead of dry numbers.
Because when you mentioned race cars, I was instantly interested, even though I don't know that much more about them, because, race cars, like, tell me more.
Yes, exactly. Yes, exactly.
You also talk about the importance of contrast.
Yes.
What do you mean by that?
Well, once you have, again, main message, going back to the system.
Go back to the main message first.
Yes, you have your main message, and then you have your analogy. Then you have to ensure, that will be the third step, that you have contrast in your presentation.
But what are we contrasting?
Okay, you might contrast so many different things depending on your topic. You could contrast, for instance, before and after.
Okay.
So we have this system before. Let's say you are introducing a new product or a new system into your company. So we used to do things this way. Of course, we are perceiving, or we know that there will be, resistance to change. So then you portray, you have the past, and then you have the future. So I know there is a struggle in between, a learning curve if you want, but I'm offering you a better system, a fastest response, or whatever you are offering with the new system or product or whatever. It could be also bad and good.
Right. Okay.
Or depending on what you are doing, really. You have to find that contrast, and you can use that several times. The minimum, of course, is 1.
Yes. Okay.
So the minimum is we're here, we're going to be there. Past and future, good and bad, pros and cons, whatever. You can start with the good and then end with the bad, or the other way around. But if you are going to have only one moment of contrast, one change in contrast, I will always recommend you to start with the bad or the negative aspect, or whatever you want to call it, and then end with the high.
Okay.
Because then they will remember the high. You don't want to tell them, my system is the best, and there are a few problems. Bye-bye.
Right, because they'll remember the problems.
Yes.
Okay.
If you open a meeting that there are problems that they need to be solved, but your system is the best, that's quite reasonable.
When we're preparing a presentation, we are experts. We know so much about the topic. How do we decide what to put into the presentation and, more importantly, what to leave out?
Yes, that's so crucial. And it's so common, actually. We are so in love, as you said, with all the things that we know and with all the time that we actually spend learning or developing those little things. And we tend to assume that, and it goes for learning or teaching as well, we tend to assume that your audience is more or less the same as you, and they are not in the same moment in time. They don't have the same experience, they don't have the same background. So it's very hard really to assume that your audience will understand all your little details just because you are so in love with them. So that's a great question, how to eliminate what they won't remember even, what could be a distraction, which is even worse. So with that very clear, concise, and compelling main message.
Oh, the message again.
It's always a message.
Right.
What you will do is filter out elements in your presentation.
Is one of the keys the length of the presentation?
Not necessarily.
Okay.
It's a very common question. Even people ask, oh, I have a 30-minute presentation. How many slides should I have? Like, I don't know.
Oh, you don't have a fixed rule?
Not at all.
Okay.
No fixed rules whatsoever.
That's a relief, because sometimes they seem so arbitrary, and how could one rule work for everyone?
Yes, I think they're really arbitrary. Well, having said that, if you are really, really bad, if we can say that, well, the rules maybe, help you to...
Yeah, in the beginning,
better.
they give it some guidelines at least.
Yes, but once you really know your thing, rules are useless, really. Like, rules for the size of a font.
Right.
Can you read it? That's a rule. If you can read it, that's okay. If you cannot read it, that's bad, and that's it. That should be the only rule.
Okay, that simplifies it. Yeah, because
Yeah.
I've heard that never use less than 24 point and don't do this, and so many words on a slide and so many lines on a slide, and
Yeah.
yeah.
Yes, well, we have certain rules, if you want, in saying it should be visible and the least text as possible, and that's it. But in general, there are no rules.
So when we're looking at what goes into a presentation, earlier you were telling me that there are different categories of information.
Oh yeah, well that's related to the three elements that every presentation has.
Okay.
So when you're presenting, it's not just the slides. Well, if you have everything on the slides and you're reading, well, it's like you are irrelevant.
Yes.
So in that particular presentation, it's just the slides. And your audience silently are begging you just to send me the slide
Yes.
deck. And
why am I
stop
here?
this.
I could have read it faster. I would have
Absolutely.
saved my travel time.
Let's save time and money.
Yes.
So then to make it effective, your presentation, you need to consider that every presentation has three parts.
Okay.
One, of course, the slides, but it's just an aid. That's what we call them, visual aids. We don't call them the presentation. We call them just visual aids. And when we say slides, I might be, using a flip chart as well.
Okay.
Or a whiteboard. And oddly enough, the principles are always the same.
Okay.
In terms of design and content are always the same. And I know we're not talking about design here, just content. So once you know that you have three elements that will help you convey a message, the slides, you, and the handout. And I think that's a part that is always, or not always, but very commonly forgotten. And we tend to think that the handout is just a printout of the slides, which is not a good handout. Because if that is your handout, then you will have to put everything on the slides.
Yes, because that's the easy way to have a presentation is make the slides the handouts too.
Yes.
Okay, so what would you suggest instead?
What I suggest is, again, going back to your strong message,
Yes.
you take all the information that you have available, that in our system actually, you filter that out previously.
Okay.
Not everything, but a lot of elements were left out in our system. But if you're now at the stage in which you're creating your slides, and again, in our system, creating the slides is one of the last stages, actually, steps.
Okay.
But if you are in that step and you have these filtered out information that you want to put in your slides, you have to remember three things.
Okay.
One is that in the slides, you will have the information that your audience must know.
Okay.
That you cannot let them go without them seeing that.
Mm-hmm.
And it's shockingly, is way less that we initially think of. Way less. It's a few elements.
Okay.
So you put that on the slides. It's always, it always makes the presenter a bit anxious, like, oh, but all that information that I need to give. And mostly on academic and maybe business environments, you need to give certain amount of information because most of the time you're informing your audience, not necessarily persuading them.
Right.
Or entertaining them. You're usually
Yes.
informing. So the information is crucial. But it's not that it has to be on the slides, not all of it, because the problem is that they won't remember it. And again, the way you measure the success is if they remember.
Yes.
So what you do is, most of it, you will be saying it yourself.
Okay.
It's easier for the audience to remember because then you can establish connection, as we are having now.
Yes.
Human to human, not slides to human. That will never work.
Right.
And then most of that information, and even a little bit more, the information that we can say they should know, it will go on your handout. Yes.
What's your main message for the people today?
I think it has to be, as I said before, if you don't have a clear, concise, and compelling message for your presentation, stop. Don't do anything else. Dedicate all the time you need to dedicate to create a clear, concise, and compelling message. And that will help you to define the content and even the style of your presentation.
Okay. What's the best way for people to reach you?
Well, you can reach me several ways. Maybe email might be the best. It's Gerardo, as I said before, Gerardo @sliding.ca.
Okay.
Or just go to the website. You can contact us through the website, and it's just sliding.ca, no www or anything.
Thanks very much for dropping by.
My pleasure.
Thanks for joining us for Tea at Taxevity. The Taxevity Insurance Advisory helps you understand insurance and bridges gaps in your coverage. There's no premium for peace of mind. How healthy is your insurance?